Good evening, everyone, and welcome to SocialFlight Live. I'm Jeff Simon. We have such an amazing show for you this evening. TV, film, stage actor, writer, and pilot Treat Williams is here to join us. I couldn't be more excited. Before we get started, just a few tips, of course. Tonight's broadcast will be recorded and available on YouTube after the show. And of course, be sure to check out SocialFlight.com and the free SocialFlight mobile apps, where there are tens of thousands of aviation events and destinations. We want to get you out there flying and going places, and we are in the middle of our Fly to Win challenge now for a Lightspeed Zulu 3 headset that we'll be giving away. So all you need to do, get the free SocialFlight mobile app, get out there and fly. It'll check you in at an airport. Even if you only do it once during the prize period, you are entered to win. With that, in addition, I just want to show everyone one last time, this is the end of our promotion period where for supporting SocialFlight, we have this amazing 3D Mustang Globe that we have available. All you need to do, it's available basically for sale to support SocialFlight. It's $49.99, and all you need to do is go to and send an email to info@socialflight.com, I-N-F-O, info@socialflight.com, and you can get one of these for yourself and help support SocialFlight. So with that, I would like to begin our introduction, begin our show tonight. Treat Williams is an actor, a writer, a passionate aviator, and he's appeared on film, stage, and television credits with over 120 individual films and appearances. It's really amazing. It makes him one of the hardest working and most recognizable actors out there. He first became known for his starring role in the 1979 musical film Hair, and later also starred in films of Prince in the City, Once Upon a Time in America, The Late Shift, and 127 Hours. He's been nominated for 3 Golden Globe Awards, 2 Satellite Awards, and an Independent Spirit Award. But most of all, he is a pilot with a sincere love affair of aviation. He's been flying for over 50 years, and along the way, he's owned a Navajo Chieftain, a T6 Texan, and his current, perhaps ideal combination of aircraft in the hangar is a Piper Cub and an Aztec. And his current roles, if you'd like to see him right now, is on Chesapeake Shores on the Hallmark Channel, where he also happens to play a pilot. You can see him with Tom Selleck in Blue Bloods, and also an upcoming show, We Own This City. I am absolutely thrilled to have Treat Williams here with us tonight. Let me bring him here on and have him join us. Welcome, Treat Williams.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Looks like we've got your mic. Now we just have to get your camera turned on here.
All right. I don't see a thing. I'm going to push the camera and see if that puts me on. Share my webcam. How we doing?
There we go. Excellent. Welcome to SocialFlight Live, Treat.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm happy to be here.
I'm a huge fan, and I think one of the things that is amazing both about your aviation career as well as your film career is it's this wonderful constant of so many different things, different types of things that you've been in through so many different years, and that seems to be comparable both with that and the way that you've been in aviation for so long and flown so many different types of aircraft on a very personal level. Tell me a little bit about getting into aviation, how you got started.
Well, I used to have this recurring dream when I was a kid that I was flying over the neighborhood and waving to all the kids, and they looked up at me and I was waving down and saying, "Hey guys, how are you?" So I had flying dreams. I also thought if I rode my tricycle fast enough, I could actually achieve liftoff. Never did. And then I just, I went off and did what kids do. I went to a prep school in Connecticut, and my football coach was a Navy SEAL, and he was really crazy. A really good guy named Tom Gaston. And I asked him, I realized I had my ring on during a game, and I asked him to hold it for me. And when I asked for it back on Monday, he said, "Oh, I sawed it in half to see what it was made of." And I said, "Well, Coach, that's a $30 ring, man." And he said, yeah. I said, "I know." I said, "Well, you owe me $30. And he said, "I don't have $30, but I do have an airplane, and I'll give you 2 free flying lessons instead." He had a Super Cub, and he had it at a field in Connecticut, which was Candlelight Farms. And so during a Saturday or a Sunday in the spring, he took me down and we started flying. And by June, I had 10 hours, and he soloed me in June of 1969. And then I went to college, and I had no money until the last year when I started singing at parties and driving a cab. And every time I got $28, I would go straight to Lancaster Airport in Pennsylvania and get my $28 flying lesson in a Cessna 150. And one day I actually went down. I was driving the cab. I got down to I had a car, and I got there, and an airplane landed, and two very elegant-looking African-American, a woman and a man, got out and said, "Hey, listen, we got to get to your college, Franklin and Marshall College. We're doing a concert." And I said, "I can't. I'm going flying. I can't take you to the college." It was Ike and Tina Turner, so I turned them down for a lesson.
You turned down Ike and Tina Turner for
I did.
Hey, sorry, I'd like to give you a lift and all.
I'd love to, but the airplane's more important than you guys. Anyway, I got my license in 1973, the year I graduated, and 6 months later I was on Broadway, and I just started, moving forward in my ratings and airplanes, and it's been going like that for the last 50 years.
That's amazing. Wow. I mean, and so from the very beginning, now, how did that fit with, obviously, at what point did you get serious in acting? Because that has obviously been a long time. You mentioned 69, and by 79, you had your first big hit.
Well, I was playing football at Franklin and Marshall, and I was pretty good. And after freshman year, I realized that football was an occupation at college, and I realized I also would have had to put on 150 pounds to be a guard in the NFL. So I decided that it was time for me to make a decision to completely focus. I knew I wanted to act by that time and act professionally. So I threw all my coins in that basket, and I stopped playing football after freshman year and worked very hard for 3 years on my acting and singing. And luckily, it was a lucky time for all of us. I went to New York and immediately was cast in Grease on Broadway as the understudy. Wow. And actually, I was Johnny Travolta's understudy. He was playing a character called Duty. And I, at that point, didn't have enough money, but then we did another show with the Andrews Sisters, and Johnny was in it too. And I gave him his 2 first airplane rides in a small plane. First one was, and he told me this when I got inducted into this Aviation Living Legends. He said to me, "You got me sick." And I said, "What do you think?" He said, "You took me up in your Clipwing Cub and got all kinds of twisted upside down, and I got sick as a dog." And I said, I'd forgotten that. And then I took him up in my Cherokee 180 when I got the 180. So he wanted to buy a BD-5. That was his dream, was to get a BD-5. At the time, that was the hot airplane, And then he went out to California. The rest with him is history with airplanes. He's had wonderful airplanes along the way.
But you gave him his first airplane ride. That's crazy.
Well, he was only 17 or 18. I was 21 or I was 22. So, yeah.
And was that at that time when you got your first Broadway show in Grease? Were you out of school at that time, or was it still?
Oh yeah, no. I got to New York, and once I got, I was the understudy, and then I left that to do the Andrews Sisters musical, and then an extraordinary thing happened. I did the last 2 weeks of a low end summer tour, and the producers came down and said, "Oh, you're pretty good. We're going to put you on Broadway in the lead." And I ended up playing Danny Zuko in Grease for 3 years. And it was during that period that I bought the Clipwing Cub, which is at a little airport in New Jersey. And the Cub was my, I looked all around. I was maybe I could only afford like a 150 or something very small. But it turned out that the Cub was great because I could learn aerobatics in it, and turned out to be a great first airplane for me. So awesome. I would take the subway down to one of the piers, where I paid $25 a month for my parking, and then drive out to New Jersey to the airport and go flying. I did that for a couple of years. And the next airplane was when I moved along from Greece to, I can't remember what I did next. I got the Cherokee 180. I think a couple of years into Greece, I got the 180. Yeah. So I
And
had
was that based at the same airport? You mentioned that you're at an airport in New Jersey.
No. Once I got the 180, I moved. It was really a long journey to get down to the airport to fly the Cub. And oh, that's a good story. I took it to have an annual the first year, and the owner of the airport was a guy named Tony Thierry, and he flew for Delta, I think, or United. I can't remember. And he sold me the airplane for $3,000. So I took it to an airport in Connecticut. And I took it to the FBO and said, I'd like you to annual this. The guy said, annual it? I won't touch it. This is a death trap. You shouldn't be in this thing. So I took it back to Tony. I said, Tony, they won't annual the airplane. He said, all right, you can have it. I'll take it back. So he paid me the $3,000 back. And that's when I moved on to the 180. So after that, and then I kept that at Teterboro I was basically based at Teterboro for 25 years. After that was home base for me. Well, Teterboro, when LA, it was Santa Monica, it was Van Nuys. When I was up, it was a 3-6 uniform. When I was up in Park City doing Everwood, that was a whole different deal. That was an airport up in the mountains of Utah. So right. I've moved the airplanes around.
Oh, that's so awesome. So now, did the airplanes basically kind of grow, I guess, with your career as you traveled?
To a degree. I wanted to get better. The first thing I wanted to do was get my instrument rating, so I got that in the Cherokee. As you know, the instrument conditions exist quite often in the Northeast, and you're pretty limited if you don't have an instrument rating. And you're not going to live very long if you don't have an instrument rating. And so a wonderful guy named Jamie Bull ended up flying. He was flying Gulfstreams for a guy. But at that time he was instructing, and we worked on my we got my instrument rating in the Cherokee and went right on to my multi, because I knew I was going to move into a twin. And so I got my multi and in a 310 at Teterboro. And then as my career, then the movie career, Hair, started. I still had the 180 when I did Hair. And then a couple movies later, I moved up onto at Kruger Aviation. Ken Kruger sold me a brand new Seneca 2, which I had to install DME. No DME. There was no such thing. You had to install it at the time. So
what year was that?
The Storm Scope was new. DME was new. There was no GPS at all. And you had to use, I can't remember what it was called. You had to use the nautical navigation, which didn't work in the desert. I even forget what it's called. It's been that long. Of course, you had VORs, but there was other ways of navigating. So that was the Seneca I had for 20 years.
Wow. And what year Seneca was that one that you're talking about?
It was the 1979 Seneca 2, turbocharged though, which was great for going back and forth to LA. It had oxygen installed, so I could go out at 12 and 15, and 12 and 16, and I'd come back at 20,000 with 100 knot tailwind in the Seneca. I'd be screaming.
One of the things I absolutely love about the things that you've done with aircraft is that you use them to get coast to coast, like you always use them to get coast to coast, and I think that's really kind of owning it from a GA perspective to do that.
Yeah, I was really, it was important to me to be able to fly heavy weather alone, and not stupidly. I mean, I would check and make sure that I had some kind of a back door to get out of a problem. But I did all kinds of weather, and I'd fly back and forth to LA. I never assumed I'd do anything but fly myself to LA for a job, and it was done, I'd fly home. I did a whole bunch of work in Canada, and I'd fly to Toronto, or I'd fly to Montreal, keep the airplane there. Later on, when I didn't want the airplane to be sitting so much at a foreign airport, so I'd have a guy fly up with me and take the airplane back to my home base, where I didn't have to pay exorbitant fees, nightly fees to keep it there. So, but yeah, and then to finish it, while I was in LA doing a sitcom with Shelley Long, I became interested. By that time I had also gotten my instructor's rating and my commercial rating. So I did those in New York. And I did them because I wanted to be a better pilot. I didn't get them because I was going to start teaching right away, because my job wouldn't allow me that. But I wanted to be better. And I thought, every time if I get a new rating, that'll force me to relearn everything that you forget, that you don't need. And so I got my commercial and my instructor. And during that time, I went back out to LA and I had the Seneca and I got interested in helicopters. And so I was doing a movie I didn't like very much. So I'd get up at 5 in the morning, and before I got work on the movie, I'd go take an hour's lesson at Van Nuys at a place called Jet Copters. And I trained in it was called at the time a Hughes 300. Schweitzer has since bought the company. And I trained in that, and then I got my commercial add-on. And I was so excited by helicopter flying. I loved it so much that I started a company. I was doing a sitcom with Shelley Long, and I started a company called SocialFlight with my friend Henry Ergoiti. And we did films and television work for 8 years. And that was a lot of fun while it lasted. So.
Yeah. Now that unfortunately ended with some.
Yeah, Henry was doing it. Yeah, unfortunately, it's one of those things where there were towers. He was doing some low-level work on a river, and there were towers, and they were buried in the trees, and the wires didn't have. Everything was against him. The wires didn't have any balls on them, and he was flying into the sun, so it was even harder to see. And he just flew right into the wires, and he didn't have the wire cutters that you usually have on a lot of the helicopters that work along power lines. And it happened very quickly, and we lost him, and so I just decided to shut the company down. I'd lost my mojo for it, Yeah. It was tough. So I lost a good friend, but I lost a lot of friends. I mean, when I was training to fly, Henry had purchased a T6 from the Paraguayan Air Force, one of their 4 advanced fighters.
Advanced fighter trainer.
Not trainer. This thing had bombs. This thing had a heat gun button. This was their fighter, okay? And he bought it for $35,000, I think, from them, and flew it up all across South America and got low on gas and put down at a little tiny strip he found with his GPS. At the time, it was a handheld GPS. And it turned out they were drug runners, and they held him for 4 days. But by the time he's ready to go, they fell in love with him, and they threw him a birthday party, got gas for him, and said, "Go ahead, go on your way. Don't talk about what we're doing. Thank you very much." And he made it to LA. And then I actually have a picture of it. I was going to send you. I forgot. I took a picture of it before. It was painted with car paint. It was just, and they had put metal on all of the elevator, and the ailerons were metal. They're supposed to be fabric. So we made a beautiful airplane out of it, and that was a lot of fun. And so I inherited that after he passed, and that was with me throughout for 16 years. I took it everywhere.
Did you continue to do any helicopter flying yourself, or did you?
I mean, helicopter. The sad thing about it is I got a friend who's got an R-44. I think now it's called a Raven. And there was a guy that had one at the airport, and he said, you want to fly it all you want. And I was flying all the time a couple years back. But in LA, renting a helicopter, if you were good at it, was like renting a car. You went out, signed up, they checked you out. The main thing is frequencies and talking to everybody out there, knowing where you are on the freeways. And I flew like crazy out there, but never flew them back here. But I was out there so much, it didn't matter. And then there's one at Rutland Airport, and I flew it a lot. And then he left, and the helicopter went with him. So I just had no access to one. And you can only own so many aircraft. So I'm not allowed to have. True. I can't have more than 2 at one time. And I've got the Cub and the Aztec. So, but one day, it was fun. I actually worked for a company as a celebrity pilot, and they had a good role model or a business model wherein they would give rides off a pier. So we were giving rides off the pier of Trump's Hotel before that all fell apart. 3-minute rides, and it was like $20 for the ride per person, and then you could buy a videotape of your ride, which was another $20. So they were making about $300 every 15 minutes, and they were doing very well at it, and so I was flying the R-44 with floats or pop-out floats off the pier, just come up, circle around, 3 minutes, down, put it down, next people get in, don't shut down. It was all very safe and very well organized.
Oh, yeah.
I did that for a while as a sort of the, you know, they let me fly so one day I took the helicopter from New Jersey and flew it up, and I landed in my paddock in my horse corral here in Vermont, and that made a lot of noise, I have to say. That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
You get to bring the airplane home, the helicopter home. That's pretty cool when you can do that.
You know, the helicopter flying is really, really fun. It was a big learning curve, but I really enjoyed it. And hopefully one day there'll be one around that I'll have access to again. It may well be fine.
So anyone near Rutland, Vermont,
when I
spend some time with Treat Williams and has an R44, sign in.
when I get the big series, you know, when I get the.
Well, so speaking of which, you've got some big series. I mean, you're on, not only, of course, is there incredible catalog of things that you've been in, but you're very, very active right now. So you're in the, as we just talked about, you're a pilot in Chesapeake Shores, which is on the Hallmark Channel. Obviously, you make appearances with Tom Selleck on Blue Bloods, and then also you got some upcoming stuff. Tell me about doing Chesapeake Shores, especially since you've got to bring the pilot aspect to it.
Well, that was actually really cool because I didn't go this far, but I had the T6 and the Seneca. I did a show called Everwood, and we were up in Park City, Utah, and I kept the airplanes at Heber Airport. It used to be called 36 Uniform. They've changed it now. So I had the Aztec and, I had the Seneca and the 6, and it was great flying the mountains up there in the 6. It was so beautiful, so much fun to do aerobatics, and then I wanted to get the family back and forth to LA and to Vermont, and we needed a larger airplane. It was just too cramped. So I talked to my financial guy and I said, I want to get a larger airplane. He said, well, you can't have both airplanes to get a larger airplane. So down I found a used Navajo Chieftain, which I fell in love with. I just made me feel like a real professional pilot, a real cockpit, you know, and a stair doors. That was so cool. You went in the back, you know, and an air conditioner. That was the best button in the whole cockpit, was that little button, air conditioner, you know, on those summer days. Man, that was good to have. And that was really cool. So I sold the Seneca and the 6, and it was just the Chieftain for quite a while. But it was a wonderful aircraft, and I you know, we tricked it out. It was beautiful in the stern and just a great airplane. I loved flying it. It's a really wonderful platform, and flew that for 10 years. And then I sold it when we moved back. We moved back and kind of just left everything in Park City, and I pretty much started over when I got back here. I got into this. I ended up buying this Piper Cub, this 1941 Cub that I love. And then I went to partnership on the Aztec with my friend Charlie, and here I am. Here we are.
I'm going to share a picture here of that for people to say. This is here's the money shot with you and the Navajo Chieftain.
That's my baby. That's my baby. I was going to see if I could those pictures. I think I will. Let me just do that real quick. I think I can get them to you.
And then this is the Aztec that you've got now.
The Aztec now, yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's my airplane. There you go.
And your Cub.
And my Cub, my little Cub. We have the fuel tank coming out. The fuel tank has lived 70 years, so that's coming out. But that's okay.
And I will actually show people this. This is an awesome pic of your T6. And
that's my son. His first ride. That's Gil's first ride. Yeah, here this. You probably can't do this, but I'm sending this to your email. That's my grandfather. He was a pilot. I took him flying a lot when I had Seneca. Anyway, we can do that on the next one. I sent you some pictures.
That's right.
I wanted to tell you. I'm going to jump to this. I wanted to tell you. I went up to my office and well, by the way. Here's my T6 too.
Oh,
that's exactly that's all the marking. Isn't that gorgeous?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
522 Lima uniform, and this is the paint job. I want to do them all. This was my Seneca 8076 kilo.
Wow.
There she is, and there's the numbers.
I love
Pretty
those.
cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
Needs models of his planes, that's for sure.
So when I was looking around, I went up and I said, I think I'll just go through my logbooks, you know. And I just went up and said, let me just check what logbooks I've had. I have 12. These are my logs. This is 50 years of flying. And it goes all the way back to, as you know, this says my solo in Connecticut. It's falling apart, but there it is. I thought it was kind of fun, and I went through it. I was looking at all these everywhere. I mean, so many places, so many airports. But I came up with this one. I said, I don't recognize this logbook, and this logbook is the logbook of a young airman by the name of Treat Andrew, my uncle, 19 years old. Fought World War II, went over to Venosa, Italy. He ended up being a gunner. He had, this is him, I think it's either a Waco, I'm not sure. Hard for me to tell with the cockpit and the engine, with the radio.
Yeah,
but
can you shift that a little bit more centered, and then we can see the front of it as well. That's pretty amazing. Other way.
Which way? Say, this way?
Opposite.
Which way? That way.
Keep going that way. Keep going that way. Further.
More?
Further.
Really?
There we go.
What do you think?
Wow, what an amazing plane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he, you know, cool. There's a picture of him with a Cub too. But he had 10 hours of flying, and for whatever reasons, I don't know whether he washed out or whether it just didn't work out. He ended up being a gunner and ended up dying at 19 in Venosa, Italy, in a crash. And I was named after him 5 years later after he died. But I like the fact that he flew, and I've got his logbook. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Now, Treat, tell me, my understanding is that your name, which is obviously unique, Treat, goes back further than your uncle in World War II. Can you tell me about that?
Well, it's an English name. There's a Richard Treat family and a Robert Treat family. It's quite Welsh. I'm Welsh, Irish, German. But Robert Treat Payne was a Bostonian lawyer, and he signed the Declaration of Independence. And he is apparently my uncle, I'm told, many times removed. My mother has told me this.
Okay.
And so the Robert Treat family came down through New England, and eventually the Treat, you know, was a last name sometimes or a maiden name, and eventually became a first name. And so my grandfather was Treat Andrew, and my uncle was Treat Andrew Jr., and then I was named Richard Treat Williams. And since my dad is Richard, I got to be Treat. Well, it's an honor to have his name and to carry his name on, I must say.
How amazing to be able to kind of trace that back to
well, I can't trace it directly, so I always am careful to say I'm told, because you know, oh yeah, he said he's related to Robert Treat Payne. Prove it. It doesn't really matter. I went and visited his grave. He's buried in Boston in the granary. The interesting thing about two things about Robert Treat Payne. One is that during the Boston Massacre trial, which was a group of British soldiers who killed Americans, and John Adams got them off, which is extraordinary. The prosecuting attorney was Robert Treat Payne. He lost the case. And also there was a book I read that it was about whatever happened to all the signers, and apparently his son married an actress, and Robert Treat Payne disowned him for marrying an actor. So he would be very unhappy, I think, to know that I would.
None of these things are lining up to the.
No. Actors. The patron saint of Saint Genesius is the patron saint of actors and thieves. So you get an idea of what they thought of us back then. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy.
That makes a lot of sense. And just to let you know, we did have a couple different viewers that did type in to let you know that aircraft that you showed of that picture, according to them, is a Naval Aircraft Factory N3N-3.
And what is it?
That's
the title. That's what kind of airplane?
That's an N3N-3.
The only radial I know well is my 6.
That's really.
But again, we were talking about flying radials. I did have that fight scene with Bob Duvall, where I told you about that, where I was in the cockpit.
I want to talk about that. You've aviation in your films, and you've had some pretty big aviation moments.
I've done some stupid stuff.
All right, so you've got to tell us some
Well,
of
I
these.
remember the first one was D.B. Cooper, and it was Art Scholl, one of the great aerobatic pilots. And Art passed away, unfortunately, doing camera work for Top Gun. He was out in the pits, and he was doing some kind of air work, and I think he was loaded up with cameras. Do you want to come up here with Daddy? You want to come up? Come on. Come on, you want to come up? I got my dog's trying. He's not feeling well. All right. He'll come up. You'll come up. Here, let me get you. Come on. Come on, everybody. Come on. Here, say hi. Say hi to everybody.
2 guests for the price of 1.
There's Chris. He's going to do the talking from here on. Okay, you lie down. So Art came in, and we did a sequence where I'm flying. What was the airplane? I told you before.
Well, he was in a pit.
No, that's when he passed away doing Top Gun. But the sequence we did in the airplane was an old trainer. I'll think of it in a second. Anybody in your audience can tell us what it is. I'll think of it, just the name went out of my head. Not a Waco. It'll come to me. So we had it was set up for spraying, so that we put controls in the spray bin, and I sat in the pilot's compartment, and then when it was difficult flying or dangerous, then Art would take over and I would duck down. And we did a sequence where I beat up a car that Bob Duvall is driving, and I lose a tire, and I'm beating the roof of the car with the airplane, and Art did all this, with somebody driving the car for Duvall. It's actually a very exciting sequence. It's quite good.
It's amazing that wasn't like just stunt people, that you were actually in the plane with Art Scholl, and there's this car that you're whacking landing gear on.
I think the whacking of the gear was done by Art alone. I think that they asked me not to be in the plane during that. But I also, the plane we used for D.B. Cooper, the pursuit of D.B. Cooper was called, he was the first guy to hijack a plane. We used the airplane. It was a 727 that was the Padres, and we painted it over with a thing. There's a kind of thing called peel paint, where you can hide, the numbers. And they let me fly it, which was pretty cool. I was early on in my flying career, and they said, "You want to fly right seat?" And I said, "Oh yeah," because just for pilots. So I got 30 minutes of 727 time in my logbook. And then we did another sequence in a film. Art came back, and we did a sequence in Flashpoint where this was the dumbest thing I've ever done. I don't know what I was. It was like a 172 or 182, I can't remember. And they put a little wooden platform on over the left landing gear, and there were no fairing, it was just the wheels. So they put a little platform there for me, and then they hitched me up with a wire attached to the interior of the airplane through the window. And so I was actually wired to the plane, standing on the outer gear of the plane.
Outside the plane while it's flying.
And we went up to 3,000 feet and did this big fight scene, okay? And then they said, and then we landed. I'm standing on the gear, and we landed with me like 3 inches above the wheel. And Art's, extraordinary. That's one of the reasons I went, because his pilot skills were beyond reason. And it was a dirt strip, and we landed and we came in. And they said, maybe you should just, taxi it around a little bit, do some fighting on the ground. So they had the camera. We did the fighting on the ground. Of course, the stuff in the air doesn't work at all because it's all so smooth. And on the ground, the bouncing around and everything looks so much better. So that's what they used for the fight scene.
So they used the fight scene. Oh my God!
I have been at 3,000 feet outside of an airplane with no parachute. That was what. And then, of course, I told you about the C-47, the DC-3. Nick Nolte threw me out of the airplane to my death, to my demise. And they did a really cool landing. It looked like a gear up landing, but they just had put down all this stuff that the gear wasn't actually up. It was down, but it looked like it was up. So it looked like a gear up landing.
And really? Just from the camera angle and stuff.
So Nick Nolte and I had a big fist fight in the back of a DC-3. And that was the end of my stunts in airplanes. I think that was the last one.
Was that first one a Stearman, by the way? That plane?
Stearman. Thank you. Whoever said it was you, I don't know. Yeah, it just went out of my head. It was a Stearman. It was a beautiful yellow Stearman. And our stunt coordinator, Chuck, can't remember Chuck's last name, but he was Steve McQueen's very dear friend. And when McQueen died, he willed his Stearman to Chuck. Oh. Chuck had been a very big part in a film called The Stuntman. And he was a really good guy and a really good stunt coordinator. Chuck Bale was his name. And one day I went out to Van Nuys, and he's sitting out in a hangar with this beautiful Stearman. And I said, "What are you doing with that?" He said, "Oh, Steve gave it to me before he died." So that was a very generous thing for Steve McQueen to do.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So that was that's part of it. The movies of it all. Little things pop into my head. When we were doing Hair, here's another. Oh no, this is another aviation thing, but I wasn't supposed to be in the plane. So they brought in a C-130, and at the end of the movie Hair, I'm singing, and I walk onto the airplane into a shadow, and I go off to Vietnam. And they brought in, it was a base not far, a base from the Midwest, I think, and they brought it in. And one of the pilots said, "Listen, you're done with the acting. Do you want to come up with us? We're going to do all the flying stuff for the cameras." And I said, "God, sure." There were 2 jump seats in the cockpit. So I get in the cockpit, and it was very cool to watch. I never saw 4 engines being, manipulated. And we were in California, and it was an Army base. It had been an Army base, and they brought in a whole bunch of guys. And I'll think of where it is in a minute. So we did the first takeoff, and they said, they had a camera planted at the end of the runway. "Would you do a second takeoff?" And they said, "Sure." Barstow, California. And we didn't realize, he didn't ask if there was actually a flight service station right on the field, but he didn't say, "Any change in the wind?" He didn't ask. And we had an 8-knot tailwind on the second pass. And we were westerly takeoff, and we took off, and I watched this, and it was, I was like, "This is cool." And we rotated, and I thought, "This is cool." And the guy next to me just looked over at me and said, "Oh man, this is bad. This is bad." And I go, "What happened?" He said, "We hit the camera. We took it out." And we came back around and landed. We had embedded the camera in the belly of the airplane on rotation, just after the wings. And they had to fly it back at 10,000 feet. They couldn't go higher than 10 because they couldn't pressurize. And what was left of the camera was actually in the airplane, so embedded in the airplane.
And that was the rotation that actually smashed that in?
Well, he rotated, but he didn't get off the ground at the same point. He was judging the way he had judged, the first takeoff. It's hard to judge a C-130, when you're going to actually be 5 feet off the ground and not hit the camera. But those are these things. And then I remember also I rented an airplane, and I took Milos Forman, the director, and Dorsey Wright, the actor, the African-American kid, wonderful guy. And we flew to Van Nuys. I took them to Van Nuys, and Milos was terrified, so he took like 3 hits of a vodka bottle before he got in the airplane. And then Dorsey, I didn't know how to cold, so we flew to LA at about, 8,500 feet. And as I started to descend, Dorsey started screaming in pain. So I had to sort of go back and talk to the tower and say, "I'm going to come down very, very slowly because I have a friend who's in a lot of pain." But I got them down. So, but that, as flying and doing movies were always interconnected. I was always flying to myself to whatever location I was going to, and it was almost always an adventure.
Yeah.
So, a lot of fun.
And you've had such experience being able to fly in so many different parts of the country. I mean, whether it be New England and as you mentioned, because we're in the same area, the fun IFR weather that we get here constantly.
Yeah, and Pam and my wife and I would go flying. We went to Taos to ski. One of the things that I used to be able to do, you can't do anymore. I would on the way to LA, I would stop and stay at the Grand Canyon, and there were none of the stuff you have to go through now. They got like little tiny places you can go and fly over the canyon, have to be a certain altitude. It was wide open. So we'd take off in the airport at the Grand Canyon, and I'd fly northbound, and I'd say to everybody, I want you to look out the windows and look straight down. And we'd be like 10 feet off the trees. And then as we got to the rim of the canyon, it's 2 miles. And the screams in the airplane always, everybody was like, it was just too hard for them to take in, That was a lot of fun. It was always great to be able to see things like that. Or I'd fly Monument Valley, and I would actually fly around the monuments, But regulations were less stringent at the time. You could pretty much, the airspace was pretty wide open, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So now when I go to Florida, it's Victor 1, baby. You don't want to get in any airspace.
Exactly. Victor 1 and air and either IFR or flight following all the way, so you don't have to worry about it at all.
Yeah, yeah, IFR is good. They take better care of you. But
So now on Chesapeake Shores, you play a pilot. So how do you work into that? Uh, I guess keeping them honest a little bit.
that was
So
one of the hardest things I ever did. I mean, in terms of not flying, they said, you owned this airplane. There's a company that was flying back and forth from Vancouver Island to Vancouver, 18-minute flight, if that.
which is where you film it. Let's make sure everybody understands.
We
Chesapeake
film on
Shores.
Vancouver, and I actually went and got my Canadian license. You can get an add-on. You cannot fly a Canadian registered aircraft without getting a Canadian add-on license to your American license. It's not hard to do. It's a little bit of paperwork. So I got that, and when we got over there, they said, I said, I owned and flew this airplane. I've got 1,000 hours in it. And they said, oh, well, do you mind taxiing it in and doing a false takeoff? And I said, no, I'd love to. I haven't flown the airplane in 2 years. This is great. So we did the taxi, and I had my daughter was so excited. The gal plays my daughter. Oh my God, you really can do this, you know. And I taxied in, you know, put it right on the numbers, and the crew was I think they were surprised that I could actually fly airplanes. And then they said that the pilot for the company has become a friend of mine, Dave. They put the camera operator in the right seat, and he wasn't belted in because there was no room. He had a handheld camera, and they put Dave lying on the floor behind me, and I went out and I called in that I was going to depart. What it was, runway 17. I can't remember what it was, and I went full power. And I got up to about 60 knots, and they wanted me to, and I went, oh man, 5 more knots. I wanted to go, but I had a guy with no seatbelt, and I thought, if the studio finds out, I'll never fly again. So I decided, power back, brakes, I took it off the runway. But that was lovely. So, but anyway,
get trusted again.
Last season I crashed now I have a Seneca in the show, and it's cheaper for them to shoot me with a Seneca. And actually, I crashed the Seneca, and I had to write. The explanation was awful. Now when you watch movies, you see guys flying an instrument approach, and they're looking out the window. You're like, do you ever look at the gauges? That looks really bad. Yeah. So I wrote what I thought was a decent explanation as to how I could possibly crash a twin-engine airplane and put it on an island with no runway on a nice day. I mean, it was very difficult, but they let me write it, and it was reasonably realistic, I think. So
did that air yet, or are you allowed to tell us?
Oh yeah, I aired it, and I actually in the last 2 episodes was in extraordinary pain as a result of my injuries and started taking OxyContin. I don't know where that's taking me in the next season, but Mick, my character, is taking more than he probably should of OxyContin. And this happens, I actually am very proud of Hallmark for allowing that, because a lot of people who never did drugs or alcohol get caught up in this stuff, especially with pain management. So we'll see where it takes me. I don't know. But I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of flying this season. It's very expensive for them, and I don't think they find it to be something that works with their show.
Right.
But
right.
I was like, don't you want to do this flying movie? I say, no, it's no fun to sit for 10 hours and pretend to fly. That's not fun. I want to get off at 4 o'clock and then go fly my airplane. I don't need to pretend to be a pilot in a movie. It's not, like I said, when it took all of my willpower not to take off that day, when I got up to, rotation speed.
So you did get a hold of the script in that other one, just to close that out. What did you end up coming up with as to why you put your Seneca down on an island?
It's not perfect. So
yeah, but you did your best.
This did happen to me. We had a ground wire in our panel before we had any of the battery operated stuff, which we have now from Garmin. God, we love Garmin. And we lost the whole panel went dark. It was nothing, and we didn't have the iPads at the time. This is about 8 or 9 years ago, I guess. And so I decided that he's got an older airplane, and I thought, he goes out to drop the ashes of a friend of his over the islands off of Chesapeake. And I thought, okay, he's out over the islands, he's dropping the ashes, he's busy doing that, and unbeknownst to him, and surprisingly, a fog bank rolls in. So there's advection fog, and he loses his panel completely. And so all he's got now is a compass. He didn't bring his phone. He didn't, he didn't have any kind of a GPS access because he thought he was just going up real quick to drop these ashes and then land. So now he doesn't know how much fog there is. So I said, well, I don't know there was fog there is. And I didn't want to take a chance because I didn't have a whole lot of fuel. I thought I was going to be out for half an hour. So I thought, well, since I don't know where the good weather is, I'm pretty much screwed here. I'll put the airplane down on a beach on an island. And then I explained that there were a lot of rocks and trees on the island. And the airplane is basically just damaged on the belly. I belly landed in and break an arm and some lacerations. But my explanation was that I'd lost my panel. I didn't have GPS at the time. I'd forgotten to bring my iPad. It was as good as I could make it to the city.
And the fog rolled in.
The fog rolled in, and I didn't know what else to do because I also wasn't allowed to do a long explanation, And then
Right.
He said, well, they find you. I said, well, I have an ELT. That went off, and they got to me within 20 minutes on the boat. And now I got to get the airplane off the island. So I hope it's believable. I know. I mean, I'm always the guy that goes, "Oh, come on! Oh, that's not possible." And then you're the guy that has to tell the story. You're like, "I hope they buy this because this isn't very good." But at least I wasn't looking out the window in IFR conditions.
Exactly. Yeah.
Panel.
Yes.
I've seen so many 1940s films where they're flying and they're not looking at the panel. There's no. In fact, I think the best IFR flying, I was noticing this last month, a couple months ago, I watched 2001 Space Odyssey. And when Keir DeLay goes to get the body of his friend that Hal has clipped his safety wire, and so his body is floating out in space, and Keir DeLay is moving, zeroing his little craft, that little, round spacecraft in, and he's got the stick, and you're watching him looking at the panel, looking at the body, looking at the panel. It's really very real that he's really approaching the body and having to sort of maneuver the machine to be able to kind of grasp the body and bring it back to the ship. It's an extraordinary sequence. And I thought that was good. Somebody did their homework. So
Isn't it great when people actually take the time to make things realistic? Maybe it works for our small, corner of the world that understand it, but I think it resonates with everyone when you do something correctly.
Well, yeah, you should have heard some of my airline pilot friends when they saw the inverted airplane and the movie recently about the drunken pilot, and he's flying inverted because he can't keep it right side up, and it's just a slow shot of him flying across the screen inverted, which is basically not possible.
Right.
So
I can only imagine what. Out of all of them, and even the ones that weren't with of the work that you've done, even the work that had nothing to do with aviation, what are some of the fondest memories? What are the ones that come to you that I guess
of flying
make your hit parade? No, of work that you've done, whether it was with flying, with people or not.
There are not that many. A lot of it is just to pay for my kids' education, and I love it. I try to make everything I do fun, and a lot of my work has been on stage. I mean, my heart is really in theater. Playing the lead in Grease on Broadway for 3 years was great fun. Taking over for Kevin Kline and Pirates of Penzance was fun. All the Broadway stuff I did, I really enjoyed, and even the off-Broadway. Mm-hmm. The movies, you pretty much mentioned the good ones. It was Hair, Prince of the City, Once Upon a Time in America. Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, I'm very proud of because I got to play one of the great psychopaths in film. And I worked with Chris Walken. That was a fun thing, too. I forgot. I flew Walken and De Niro down to Cuba for a film festival when we weren't allowed to go. And that was a crazy, wonderful, fun trip. Flying into Cuba, the only people allowed in, And if you're going to go to Cuba for a film festival, go with Robert De Niro, You get treated pretty well. So Walken and De Niro and I for a week in Cuba, and I flew them down from I flew Walken down to Florida, and then Bob met us there, and then I flew everybody over to the island. That was a great trip.
That's amazing. I mean,
you went to the Bahamas a lot. I had property in Eleuthera in the Bahamas. Bahamian flying is really, really fun. Almost always good weather, except in the afternoons and thunderstorm, but you can skirt them, Yeah, and movies after that. The Late Shift, where I played Mike Ovitz. That was great. That was the Emmy nom, which that was the nomination that didn't get mentioned. But Everwood was a wonderful show that I had, where I had the Six and the Chieftain, and we were in Park City, Utah. So I'm an avid skier, so I dropped my kids to school and hit the slopes if I wasn't working. That was a great 10 years, I have to say. A lot of skiing, great skiing, and a great flying, you know. And the trip to LA, that's a wonderful, wonderful trip to LA. Basically, you fly through a canyon, turn left, go to Vegas, turn right, you know, to Palmdale, and then you go to Santa Monica. And Santa Monica was like 4 minutes from my hotel. So that was a lot of fun back and forth from LA to Santa Monica. And they're closing it, you know, and not too distant, which I'm very sorry. Very sorry.
Can we hear about one of the airports closing? It is just another chapter of history that's just going away.
It's where Jimmy Stewart learned to fly. It's where our friend learned to fly. You know, it's got such a history. Harrison's airplanes, Harrison Ford is a friend, and all his stuff is there. I'm sorry to see it go. It's a wonderful, wonderful field. But time marches on, I guess. Yeah. They're closing them. Well, Utah, I talked about it. They're closing airports up. Luckily, I keep my Cub in summer at Cambridge in New York, and that's like a bunch of old guys with rag wings. It's fabulous. You know, it's
you
like
can't close those airports because no one can find them. They don't know they're there.
Every town had a local airport. It's like going with your dad on a Saturday morning in 1956, you know, and parking by the fence and watching the planes land. You know, I go down there sometimes just to watch people fly. It's just so much fun to be there. So many cool airplanes, you know.
That's so wonderful.
Unpretentious pilots, people who really fly. Whereas at Heber in Park City, everybody had his own jet. It was all these guys with their hangars in there, you know, Citation 2s and all kinds of stuff, single pilot aircraft. A guy had, you know, guys flying Pilatuses with, you know, 300 hours of flight time.
That's always a good recipe.
Yeah.
It never works out badly.
No. So anyway, it's been a really, you know, I don't know what I would have done without it. I've always found it to be a great leveler. You know, the good news about flying is that if you're in a play or a movie and you get reviewed that you stink and you think, I didn't think I stunk. I thought it was pretty good in that. I thought you did a good job. What's he talking about? But in an airplane, it's really not debatable. You fly a flight well or you don't, you know, and it's pretty obvious if you've done a good job, and you know you have or you haven't. You've made mistakes, you've corrected them, broken the chains, how we say. So I've always thought that there was a wonderful kind of reality to flying that kept me grounded, you know.
Yeah.
So
it's an area that you focus, you perform in, you take pride out of, and you're always honing your craft. So
I don't think I've ever made a takeoff where my heart didn't beat just a little bit faster the minute we left the ground, you know. It's really extraordinary that whatever problems you have that day, they seem to just stay on the ground, and you get a chance to just go up and forget everything, but just be, you know, all that stuff. That stuff is hokey, but it's real, you know, being one with the airplane, you know, slipping the surly bonds, all those phrases, they're actually real. Pretty cool.
Wow, it's so true.
Yeah.
So what do you have coming up? I know you are working on.
I'm going to come to your house and help you build that P-51 that's in your living room. When you said buy this globe, I said, I don't want the globe. I want a living room with a P-51 in it, like he's got. Do people watching this know that you've got an airplane in your living room? Have you got
a few of them actually know that there's an airplane sitting here in a house.
And it's a P-51 with an automobile engine going in. I'm so excited. I'm coming over.
You're going to come down here. I'm going to put you to work.
I love doing that stuff.
Oh, that's right. We'll have you starring in the debut as the aircraft starts to make its way out of the house.
Oh gosh, you can put your window back in after you get it out.
Exactly. Shh, we're not giving any secrets away.
No. Okay. Oh my goodness, I think that's so cool.
It is. I will say it goes on my life list of things that I want to do. Yeah, I'd love to have you come here at some point and work together, and we'll certainly wind our way up to see you up in Rutland as well. Now,
But one of the
tell
things
everybody.
I didn't tell you in terms of all the airplanes, I did get my citation rating, CE
Ooh,
500 rating, while I was doing the show, and a guy wanted, because I had buku hours and very little jet time, except I had a lot of time in the Bell 206, which is the only jet engine I dealt with. But he wanted me to fly his airplane with him. And so a couple of us got our ratings. We went down flight safety. That was a lot of fun. And I tried to roll the simulator. Didn't go well. We had to reboot the whole simulator. I said, can I do a roll? He said, sure. The simulator just kind of, it couldn't take it. It's not it wasn't an aerobatic simulator. It wasn't on a gimbal that it could spin. So, but that was a lot of fun too. That was another aircraft that I flew a lot.
Is there a dream plane that if money was no object, anything like that, what you trade out for, or do you have the mix you want?
I'm really, really happy. I keep telling people I have a Gulfstream. I have a 150 knot airplane with a Gulfstream 5 panel. I mean, the panel on my Aztec is, my partner loves gadgetry. So we've got the Garmin 750, 650. We've got the TXI, which is the movie screen. It's like Panavision. It's just astonishing that I started with a pencil on a lap, in my Cub, and I had a pencil line drawn, and that we've come this far. And we got the 275, which has got a battery, so you've got everything in that little tiny gauge, little round gauge. So if you lose, the GPS is battery operated, and so is the 275. So I would never have had that accident in my TV show if I was flying the Aztec. But it's really, really a beautiful panel. And I'm still on the back side of it sometimes because I'm away 4 months and I have to come back and reboot. I don't think so. I think, if anything, if I traded the Cub in for a Super Cub, maybe, with the fatty wheels, with a little bit more. I mean, a hot day with my son and I, it's a little dicey getting out of the short fields, with the 65 horsepower at 90 degrees. You got to make sure you got enough runway and not a lot of trees at the end. But no, I am very grateful. I went through a period where we lost everything years ago, and it's made me extremely grateful to be able to get behind the stick of anything and get off the ground. I'm very grateful to fly anything. I don't think there's ever been an aircraft that I've flown that wasn't fun. So I don't really have this great, I did have a great desire for the Chieftain because of the family and because I wanted a big boy airplane at one point. But that's all done. I've done all that, and I'm really so grateful to have what I've got. I barely ever fill the seats in the airplane. Still, it seats 5 plus pilot, and I don't think I've ever put more than 3 guys in, except once we had a full boat. But aside from that, being able to go up, and the great thing about the Cub is, open the hangar door, walk around, start it, and go. There's a very limited amount of pre-flight, whereas with the T6, there's a lot to do to get it out of the hangar and get it started and get it warmed up. And so the Cub is nice if you just want to go up for an hour. There's very little to it. I don't know about you, but I have friends, and I don't know about the other pilots, that say to me, I think I'm going to really impress them with all my instrument skills in the Aztec and, going from point A to point B and talking to everybody. And of course, during the flight, they always say, Tree, can I? And I'm like, get the finger up, I'm talking to center, I'm talking to tower, I'm talking to ground. And after I've taken them in both airplanes, they always invariably say, it's so much more fun to fly with you in the Cub than the Aztec because you talk to me the whole time. All we do is chat. I can ask you all the questions. You never have to talk to anybody. So you're talking to me, and I can understand what you're doing. Whereas in the other airplane, you're always telling me to shut up.
Isn't that true? I mean, the love of flying is down in many cases, it's down at the lower end. That's the beauty of it.
I'm probably the guy that was flying for the airlines and gets out of the 747 or, the 777, goes home after a trip to Europe, and drops his bag and goes out to the grass strip and gets in his cup.
I love
Those
that.
are the guys that there was so many guys that fly for Delta, because Delta was a hub in Salt Lake. All these Delta pilots had little tiny airplanes that they loved flying. Couldn't wait to get in these little airplanes and just knock around, and they'd spend hours just tinkering on them. And I thought those are pilots that really love to fly. When you have to go from point A to point B and you have to fly within the confines of the airline, you can't say, hey, let's yank and crank a little bit. Some guys have done it when I've been in the airlines, but I didn't really like it. But I think they're the guys that really are absolutely in love with flying, and you can't keep them out of the airplane.
So true. Well, Treat, I hope you'll come back. We have so many other things to talk about. We could just sit here and hangar fly, and I think that's what I'd like to do next time with you.
And let's have at it. I'll tell you about the close calls, the engine outs, the two catastrophic engine failures in the Seneca. Lots to talk about.
That's our teaser for next time. It's going to be all of the hangar flying, and as you mentioned, engine outs, nighttime, all sorts of emergencies.
My favorite.
I want to leave people with that teaser so that they know what's coming next.
My favorite thing at Flying Magazine was I learned about flying from that. I was always it was the first thing I'd always go to. What stupid thing did somebody do that I can learn from?
So next episode that we're going to have is going to be I learned about flying from Treat.
Oh, now I learned from Bronco Lirio. He's my guy. I go right to him on YouTube. He does all the accidents. But yeah, it's been great to talk to you. I had a lot of fun.
Excellent.
And I'm going to come see that airplane.
What's that?
I'm going to come see that P-51 in your living room.
Oh, excellent. Perfect. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Social Flight Live. We will absolutely have you back and talk about all those other things, because I know there's way more to talk about than we can fit in tonight.
You can't shut me up on the airplane.
And thanks to everyone back there, and I hope everyone stays safe, healthy, and enjoying in the new year.
It was an honor. Thank you so much.
Good night, Trent. And to all of you, I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening for Social Flight Live. Everything you do to support general aviation, we are here for you with Social Flight. That's the entire purpose of our show, why we started it at the beginning of the pandemic. Next week on Tuesday, January 18th, Mark and Mike Patey are here just before, just before their induction as living legends in that incredible society that happens in that big event that's happening out in Los Angeles. And then on Tuesday, January 25th, Aspen Avionics CEO John Uzikai will be here on the show. He's a fascinating individual at the helm of an incredibly innovative company. We'll talk about a lot of things going on there and his background as a pilot as well. And then on Tuesday, February 1st, we are joined by author and airline pilot Laura Savino. And she has a great book out called Jet Boss, and there's going to be so much to talk about with that as well. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jeff Simon for Social Flight. Blue skies.